The young man at the bank slid the paper across the counter to me and lowered his voice the way you do at a funeral and told me that my savings account, the one Walt and I had built over 40 years, was down to $211. And when I said that had to be a mistake, that there ought to be near 80,000 in there, he looked at me with such gentle pity that I wanted to disappear into the floor. And he said, real soft, "Ma'am, most of it was withdrawn over the last 2 years by the other name on the account. By Rita." Rita, my best friend of 50 years, the maid of honor at my wedding, the godmother of my son, the woman I had called first with every joy and every sorrow since we were both 23-year-old brides. The woman I trusted so completely that I had put her name on my accounts and made her my power of attorney. Because if anything ever happened to me, who else on this earth would I want handling things but Rita? I stood at that bank counter, 73 years old, and learned from a stranger half my age that the person I loved most in the world had been quietly emptying me out, dollar by dollar, for 2 years, while looking me in the eye over coffee every single morning. And here is the thing Rita never once suspected, the thing that turned this whole story around. The careful habit of a woman who ran a flower shop for 42 years and knew the difference between a friend and a column of figures. Rita was certain I was a trusting old fool with my head in the flowers, a woman who'd sign anything and never check. She was about to find out exactly how wrong she'd been. And by the time she did, I'd have my money, my mind, and the last word in 50 years of friendship. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ada. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a small town in Iowa. The kind of place that's flat and green and honest, where the corn comes up to your shoulders by July, and everybody knows whose truck that is going by. I own the flower shop on Main Street for 42 years, Ada's Flowers. I did this town's weddings and its funerals and its proms and its anniversaries and its apologies. 2 whole generations of them. I made the corsage for a girl's first dance, and then, 30 years later, the spray for her mother's casket, and I knew which was which by heart. A florist sees a town at its highest and its lowest, and learns that they're closer together than you'd think. And I ran that shop like a businesswoman, because that's what it was, a business. And I kept my books and watched my pennies, and never once let the romance of the flowers fool me about the arithmetic of the cash drawer. I want you to hold on to that. The part about the careful businesswoman behind the pretty window. Because everyone in this story forgot her, including, very nearly, me. There is one habit I'll come back to. A small, dull bookkeeping habit, 42 years behind a counter, put into me, that turned out to be the thing that saved my whole life. But you have to understand the friendship first, because you cannot feel the size of what Rita did unless you understand that Rita was not a friend to me. Rita was my family. So let me tell you about the 50 years before I tell you about the 2. Rita and I met when we were 23. 2 young brides newly landed in the same little town, hanging the wash on the line in adjoining backyards. And we were thick as thieves before the sheets were dry. We raised our babies in and out of each other's kitchens. We got each other through all of it. The money-tight years when we'd split a pound of coffee between us. The years our husbands made us want to throw the good dishes. The long afternoons and the longer nights. She stood up at my wedding in a dress she made herself, and I stood up at hers. When I screwed up my courage and opened the flower shop and was so scared I could hardly sleep, Rita came in every single morning for a solid month and pretended she needed one stem of something, a single carnation, just so that anybody passing by would see a customer and the shop wouldn't look empty and doomed. She did that for me. I did the flowers for her. Carol's wedding and wouldn't take $1 and was insulted, she offered. We had a standing breakfast, the two of us, every blessed morning at the Coffee Cup on Main Street, for 30 years, the same booth. And we knew each other's stories so well we could finish them for each other. And we did. And we laughed at the same worn-out jokes like we'd never heard them before. Rita knew where every body was buried in my heart, and I knew hers. That is what 50 years builds. That is what she spent. Let me set my coffee down a minute, because I've been talking a while, and it would do my heart good to know who's keeping me company tonight. Wherever you are, whatever town, leave it down below where I can see it. The mornings got awfully quiet after all this, and a little company, even the kind I'll never see across a table, means more to me than I know how to say. There now. Where was I? 50 years. The kind of friendship you'd swear on your life you could stake your life on. And then Walt died, 6 years ago. My Walt, my husband of 44 years. And the house went silent in that particular way. And about 2 years after that, Rita lost her Jean. And there we were, the two of us, two old widows in a small Iowa town, with our men in the ground and our children grown and gone. And we did the most natural thing in all the world. We leaned all the way into each other. The way you lean two cut stalks together so neither one falls. Rita became my person. Not my son Mark, understand, who is a good boy, but who lives all the way out in Denver and has his own busy life and called on Sundays, dutiful and warm and 1,000 miles away. It was Rita who drove me to the eye doctor. Rita I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas with. Rita I called at 11 at night when the grief came up out of nowhere and sat on my chest. Rita was the one who knew. So when my lawyer asked me, some years back, who I wanted as my power of attorney, who I trusted to step in and handle my affairs if I ever couldn't, I did not even have to think about it for 1 second. Rita, of course. And put her on the checking account too, I said, so she can pay my bills if I ever land in the hospital. Who else would I name? Who on this earth but Rita? I handed her the keys to everything Walt and I had built in 44 years. And I did it gladly, with a full and grateful heart. And I remember actually feeling lucky, downright blessed, that I had one person in this whole world I trusted that completely and without a flicker of doubt. I'm telling you all of this so that you understand one thing. What happened was not carelessness. I was never careless a day in my life. It was love. It was the deepest and most complete trust of my whole life, freely given. And that, the love and the trust themselves, is the precise thing she used as her tool. You cannot pick a lock that someone has already handed you the key to. It started so small, I didn't see it, the way these things do. A morning here and there when Rita couldn't make breakfast, said she was tired, when Rita had never been too tired for breakfast in 30 years. A new tightness around her, a distraction, a way she had of changing the subject fast when I asked about her son, Danny. And the money, when it started to go, went quietly, in amounts a busy old woman wouldn't notice. I didn't balance that savings account every month the way I did the shop's books. Because why would I? It just sat there. Our nest egg. Walt's and mine. The safe thing at the bottom of everything. I trusted it was there the way you trust the floor is there. You don't check the floor. The first crack came when my debit card was declined at the pharmacy, in front of a line of people, for a $40 prescription. I was mortified. I assumed it was a bank error. I went in to sort out the bank's mistake, and that's when the gentle young man slid the paper across the counter. And the floor I'd trusted my whole life simply was not there. I want to tell you how I found out the whole of it, because it did not come all at once. And the not believing was its own particular agony, worse in its way than the believing that came after. Because the very first thing I did, standing there at that bank counter with the floor gone out from under me, was defend her. There has to be some explanation, I told the gentle young man, and I could hear my own voice doing it, climbing, pleading. Rita handles things for me, you understand. She's my dearest friend. She's been my friend 50 years. She would never... And I heard the sentence die in my own throat, because he had slid the full printout across to me by then, 2 years of it, line by patient line. And there it simply was, in black ink on white paper. No room left in it for an explanation. Withdrawal after withdrawal after withdrawal. Checks made out to cash. Transfers to accounts I didn't know. And Rita's signature. The signature I would have known in the dark, in my sleep. Anywhere on this earth. Signed across check after check after check, draining my life away, a few hundred here and a couple thousand there, slow and steady as a leak in a roof, for 2 solid years. All through the same 2 years, she'd sat across from me in our booth at the coffee cup and held my hand while I cried about how much I still missed my Walt. She had comforted my grief with one hand and emptied my savings with the other, every morning for 2 years. I drove home from that bank so slowly that people honked at me because I could not make my hands work right on the wheel. I have to be fair, even now, even after everything, because the truth always has more than one room, and I have made myself walk through Rita's, slow, with the light on. Because when it all finally came out, I learned the why of it, and the why did not excuse one single penny of it. But it did change the shape of my anger, the way knowing a storm's path doesn't stop the storm, but lets you understand it. Rita's boy, Danny, her only child, the one she'd lain awake over his whole life, had gotten himself into the bad kind of trouble. The kind with dangerous men attached to it, gambling debts that had grown teeth and started making calls in the night. And Rita, my Rita, standing at the crossroads where she had to choose between losing her son and betraying her best friend, made the choice that a drowning mother makes, the wrong one, the human one. And she told herself a story every single time she did it, that it was only a loan, that she'd put it all back the minute Danny got on his feet, that Ada had plenty, more than she needed, and Ada would understand. And Ada never had to know. She was not a con artist. She had not spent 50 years befriending me as some long game to rob me at the end. She was a panicked mother, grabbing the only life raft within reach to keep her boy's head above the water. And the raft was me. And she pushed me under, inch by inch, without ever once letting herself look straight at the fact that drowning me was what she was doing. I understand it. As a mother, God help me, I even understand it. But I have learned that understanding why a person's hands are around your throat does not for one moment require you to stop prying them loose. Because here is the thing she did that I have not been able to make my peace with. the thing that was so much worse than the money. When I went to her, the very day after the bank, when I sat down at her kitchen table with the printouts shaking in my hand and asked her, my voice cracking down the middle, "Rita, please, tell me what happened to my money." She looked me dead in the eye, the same eyes I'd looked into across a breakfast booth for 30 years. And she lied to me. She didn't crumble. She didn't fall on my neck and confess and beg. She reached across the table and patted my hand in that soft, sorrowful, gentle way, and she said, "Oh, honey, Ada, sweetheart, listen to me. I think maybe you're getting a little bit confused about your accounts. It happens to all of us at our age. There's no shame in it. Why don't you just let me take over the money completely now, so you don't have to worry your poor head about any of it ever again?" She had emptied my life savings. And the instant I caught her at it, her plan, smooth as anything, was to convince me that I was losing my mind, and then to take formal control of whatever was left, all under the tender cover of a devoted friend looking after a poor, confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own checkbook anymore. And that, my friends, is the cruelest thing in this entire story. Far crueler than any amount of stolen money. And I need you to understand why. Because the money was only money. But she reached past the money, and she grabbed for my mind. She went straight for the one thing a woman my age guards more fearfully than any dollar. The secret nighttime terror that the thoughts are starting to go soft. That the self is starting to slip its moorings. And she knew that fear of mine intimately. She knew it because we had talked about it, the two of us, late at night. Two aging women confiding our most private dreads to each other in the dark, the way only 50-year friends can. I had handed her that fear in trust, the most naked fear I had. And when the moment came, she picked it up and tried to drive it into me like a blade to finish the job. 50 years of my secrets, and she reached unerringly for the very softest one. That was the season I stopped sleeping. And I'll be honest with you, because this is the truest and the most frightening part of the whole thing. For a few terrible days, I very nearly believed her. That is what that kind of cruelty does to a person. And I didn't even have the word for it then. I only knew the sick, swimming, unmoored feeling of it. Because the alternative to being confused was so very much worse than being confused. If I was not losing my mind, then Rita, my sister of 50 years, the one fixed star in my whole dark, widowed sky, had been robbing me blind and lying to my face every single morning over coffee. And some cowardly, exhausted, lonely part of me would almost rather have been the one losing her mind, because a confused old woman at least still had her best friend in all the world, while a clear-headed one had nobody at all. I sat alone in my quiet house, night after night, and I thought, maybe I am misremembering things. Maybe the accounts really are muddled, and it's me that muddled them. Maybe I should just do what Rita says and let her take it all over, and keep the peace, and keep her. Maybe being right simply wasn't worth being this alone. I had my hand on the telephone to call her and tell her, yes, fine, you're right. You handle everything. I'm getting muddled in my old age. My hand was on the phone. And then I remembered the habit, the small, dull, unglamorous, life-saving habit. Because I had run a business for 42 years, and old habits don't die just because you retire, and one of mine, bone deep, was that I never, ever kept all my eggs in the one basket, and I never fully trusted any account I couldn't see with my own two eyes whenever I pleased. Walt used to tease me about it, said I was squirrel-minded, always with something tucked away. And the plain truth was, the savings account Rita had spent 2 years draining, the joint one with her name on it for convenience, had never been where the real money lived. Years back, quietly, without a word to a soul, the careful florist in me had moved the bulk of our nest egg into a separate account, at a different bank in the next town over, in my name and my name only, that Rita had never known about, that wasn't written on any piece of paper she'd ever laid eyes on. And the truth of it is, it hadn't even been suspicion of her. Not then. Not for 1 second. It was just 42 years of a businesswoman's instinct to keep something back, somewhere safe, that no other living hand could reach. Rita had emptied the convenience account. She'd taken near $80,000, and that was real. And it was a deep wound, and I don't make light of it. But she had not gotten the half of what she was certain she'd gotten, because she had assumed, the way thieves always assume, that a sentimental old florist with her head in the roses would never in 100 years have the hard sense to keep a second, secret set of books on her own life. And the very moment I remembered that account, sitting there with my hand still resting on the telephone, the sick swimming feeling drained right out of me, and something solid came back in its place. Because I will tell you what a confused old woman cannot do. A confused old woman cannot quietly maintain a secret savings account at a second bank, in her own name, with the statements filed away by month in a labelled folder, for years. It is not possible. The simple existence of that account, in my own careful hand, was the proof, to me, in figures I could hold, that whatever Rita said, my mind was sound as a bell. She had tried to convince me I was losing myself, and the dull, careful habit of my entire working life rose up out of a desk drawer and testified, in plain numbers, that I was not lost at all. I put the telephone down. I was not going to call Rita and surrender my mind to her. I was going to call my lawyer and take my life back. I want to slow down here, because this is where the florist stopped grieving and started thinking. And a florist who'd run a business for 42 years turned out to be a great deal harder to rob than Rita had counted on. Her name was Ms. Reyes, a sharp young attorney 2 towns over, and she was kind to me, but she did not soften the words. And I was grateful for that, because I'd had quite enough softening from Rita's gentle, lying voice. She told me plainly that what Rita had done had a name, and the name was financial elder abuse, and that it was not a falling out between friends or a misunderstanding about money. It was a crime, a real one, with prison time attached to it. She told me the very first thing to do that same day, before the sun went down, was to revoke that power of attorney and strip Rita's name off every account and document it carried. And we did exactly that afternoon. And I felt the locks of my own life turning back over to me, one by one, as we did it. She told me to gather every statement going back to the beginning, and I told her I already had them, by month, in order, in a folder, because of course I did. And she looked at me a moment and said, "Ada, you'd have made a heck of a lawyer." And then she told me the thing that mattered most. She told me that because my real savings had been safe in that second account all along, and because I'd caught it while Rita still had a life and a house and a son to lose, I held a kind of power in my hands that most victims of this crime never get to hold. because most of the time, the money is simply gone and the thief simply walks. My money was largely safe. The proof was airtight, in Rita's own signature. And so the choice of what came next, prison or no prison, mercy or the full weight of the law, was not the prosecutor's and not Rita's. It was mine, and mine alone, to make. I thought about it for 3 days and 3 sleepless nights. I thought about Danny and the dangerous men, and a mother drowning in a debt that wasn't even hers. I thought about 50 years of breakfasts in the same booth. And I thought about Walt, and what my Walt would say. And I knew exactly what he'd say, because Walt was a fair man, but he was never a soft one. He'd have said, "Ada, mercy and letting somebody get clean away with it are 2 different things, and don't you dare confuse them just because it hurts." So here is what I did, and it is the thing I am proudest of in all my 73 years. Prouder than the shop, prouder than anything. I did not send Rita to prison. I am too old to want a jail cell on my conscience for whatever years I've got left. And I could not be the one to leave Danny without his mother, on top of every other trouble he'd brought down on her. And I decided that 50 years has to be worth some mercy, or else it was never worth one single thing at all. But, and you hear me, I did not let it simply stand either. Because letting it stand, waving it off, calling it water under the bridge, would have been its own kind of lie. The lie that what she did to me was all right. And it was not all right. It will never be all right. So I had Ms. Reyes draw up a real agreement, a legal one with teeth in it, in which Rita acknowledged in her own hand and her own signature every single dollar she had taken from me, line by line by line, and agreed to pay back what she was able on a schedule for the rest of her natural life. And understand me, it was never about the money. I told you, my real savings were safe. I'd have gotten by just fine without a penny of what she took. It was about the truth getting written down, and signed, and witnessed, and made permanent. Because the very worst thing she had tried to do to me was make the truth disappear, to dissolve it into the confused imaginings of a fading old woman who couldn't be trusted to remember her own accounts. And that one document meant that never again, not to me, not to her own son, not to a living soul on this green earth, could Rita ever say that poor old Ada had simply gotten muddled about the money. Her name on the truth, forever, in ink that does not fade. That was my justice. Not a cell and not revenge, just the truth, set down permanent, where no amount of gentle, loving, lying could ever reach back in and smudge it away. And then I gave her my final word. I drove out to Rita's place myself, and I sat down at her kitchen table one last time, the same table where I'd sat 1,000 times across 50 years. And I did not raise my voice, not once, because I'd learned across 42 years behind a counter that the quiet word, said plainly and just once, lands a great deal harder than all the shouting in the world. I told her I knew everything, not just the money, all of it, the whole shape of it. I told her I knew about Danny, and the men, and the debts, and that I was sorry, more sorry than I had words for the terror she'd been carrying alone. And then I told her the thing I think she will go on hearing in the quiet of her own kitchen for the rest of her days. I said, Rita, if you had only come to me. In 50 years, did you ever once know me to turn away a friend in trouble? You could have sat right here and told me Danny was drowning, and I'd have written the check myself and called it love and never thought of it again. That's what 50 years was supposed to buy you. But you didn't ask. You stole, and you lied. And worst of all, when I caught you, you tried to convince me I was losing my own mind. You took the most frightened thing I ever told you, the one I trusted only to you, and you tried to turn it into the knife. The money I can forgive. Rita, I have forgiven it. But the rest? The reaching for my mind, there is no road back from that one. So I forgive you, because I am far too old to carry hate, and it spoils in you like fruit left out. But I will never trust you again. I will never sit at this table again. And this is the last time in this life you will hear my voice. Goodbye, Rita. And I stood up, and I left her weeping at her own kitchen table. And I did not look back, not once. And I have not spoken a single word to her from that day to this. I'm 73 years old, and I am all right. Better than all right, if you can believe it. Losing Rita tore a 50-year hole right through the middle of my life. And I won't stand here and pretend it didn't, because some mornings, even now, I still reach for the telephone to tell her something funny before I remember. And the remembering is a small, fresh grief every single time. But here is what I found down in that hole, once I finally stopped bleeding into it and looked around. I found my son. I had spent 20 years quietly letting Rita be my whole family, so that I would never have to sit with how far away my Mark had drifted. So I'd never have to feel that particular ache. And when Rita was gone, and the silence in the house got loud enough, I finally picked up that phone and I really talked to my boy. Told him the whole sorry story. And it turned out that Mark had been waiting on the other end of that line for years, hurt and quiet, for his mother to turn toward him and actually need him. He flies in now, every couple of months. He calls about real things, not just dutiful Sunday weather. I am getting my son back at 73 years old, my own flesh and blood. And the bitter truth of it is, I would never once have reached for him if Rita hadn't first emptied my hand of everything I've been holding instead. Sometimes the thing that robs you clears a space for what should have been there all along. And I found other people, too, smaller and quieter and gentler, and, above all, honest. The kind young man from the bank, the one who slid me that terrible paper so gently. He checks in on me now, brings his little girl by the house. A couple of widows from the church who I'd always been too busy with Rita to really know. And I do the flowers now, for free, every week, for the women's shelter 2 towns over. Because it turns out, I learned something I didn't know I knew about women who have had everything taken from them by the one person they trusted most in the world. And I have a great many flowers left in me, and a great deal to say to them. And the flowers say it better than I can. People think the cruelest betrayal comes from an enemy, or a stranger, or plain greed. But I've learned, the hardest way there is, that the cruelest one comes from the person you handed the keys to yourself, gladly, with your whole open heart. Because you cannot be robbed of what you guarded. You can only be robbed of what you left wide open in love and in trust. There's no breaking in when you've already given them the key. And the deepest cut of it is not even the money, not by a mile. It's when they reach right past the money and grab for your very mind. When they take the secret fears you confided to them in the dark in 50 years of love and sharpen those fears into the blade they finish you with. That nearly worked on me. It very nearly convinced a clear-headed, careful woman that she was lost. Because being lost hurt less than being betrayed. So if you are out there tonight, and someone you love and trust completely is the one holding your money, your medicine, your power of attorney, your affairs, let me tell you what 42 years behind a counter and one stolen nest egg taught me. And I don't say it to make you hard. I say it to keep you whole. Love them. Trust them. Hand them the key if your heart says to. But keep one set of books they don't know about. Keep something back, somewhere safe, in your own name and your own hand, that no one else can see or touch. Not because you expect the worst from the people you love, but because trust is a gift you give, and it was never a debt you owe. And a gift can be given freely and still be quietly guarded. And there is no contradiction in that, only wisdom. And hear me on this last part, because it's the one that matters most. If anyone at all, friend or family, or your own flesh and blood, ever tries to tell you that you're confused, that you're slipping, that you're losing yourself, at the very moment they happen to stand to gain by your believing it. You take hold of your own mind with both hands, and you go and you check the books for yourself. Your mind is the one possession in this whole world that no other soul can take from you without your permission. So don't you ever hand over that permission. Not for love, not for loneliness, not for 50 years of breakfast. If this story found you tonight, stay a while and I'll have another for you soon. And tell me down below, has someone you trusted with everything ever betrayed that trust? And how did you find your feet again? And where in this world are you keeping me company from tonight? I read every single one. Take care of yourself, and keep one set of books that are only yours.